And sweets for life.
No, proper pills. We don't like the bottle.
Sweets and dental pills.
No, we can get dentals with it. We got no more dental bills then.
Imagine that.
Tomorrow night we need.
Or tomorrow night. Yes, tomorrow night. I know.
It's not in the book.
No, parents next Wednesday.
No. Today you need. Tomorrow you need the next volume.
No,
Yeah.
but Seum is next Tuesday.
Yeah, Sim is not.
Yeah.
Have you got the new volumes
They
ready?
asked me when's the next payroll, so I told him he wants to come.
You should come straight away, otherwise what happens is
It's hard though in the middle of. I'll put
Yeah.
it back. I'll put it back.
now I'm going to turn off this thing.
Oh, you stay for the share. Wait, coach him.
How do these people send out personalized messages on WhatsApp to everybody?
No.
David Saloff,
They just fit it. They just change each one. It's the copy and paste.
They must use an app for it.
No, they copy and paste and they go through it.
No, I don't think so.
Well, that's Jenny does it. You just go through each one and change the person. There's no action.
Yeah.
He's a nice man, now you've had
Okay, let's get going. We're up to Ein Testament Aleph. The Mishnah tells us that on Pesach is unique, that you have to have Torah meat to eat. If you don't have Torah meat to eat, we don't do Zrika. Came along Rav, and he added that B'diavad, it's okay, even if there's no Torah meat. That means if you did the Zrika, then B'diavad, it's okay. The more challenged Rav, that where did he get it from? And yesterday we said that it's from Onosan. Today the Gemara establishes very similar actually. The Rav found his source from Rabbi Shiur. We're top of Ein Testament Aleph top line. Rabbi Yisrael, Rav Damak Rabbi Shiur, he holds like Rabbi Shiur. The Tanya. Rabbi Shiur Imekras Vachin Shebetoya Ul Kabbonos. Bein Shnit V'Basar V'Chilev Kaim, Bein Shnit V'Chilev V'Basar Kaim. Whether there's a bit of meat for the owners to eat or the kind to eat, or whether there's a bit of fat to eat for the Mizbeach, Zerikas Adam. You can do Zrika. As long as there's something from the Mizbeach or the owners to eat, you can do Zrika. But Nozi Voisa Pesach, a Nozi, and something becomes called Pesach, then only if Nit Mochele V'Basar Kayam Zerikas Adam. Only if you've got some Basar, you can do Zrika. But Nit V'Basar V'Chelev Kayam, ain't Zerikas Adam, you don't do Zrika. Why? So we mentioned it yesterday that Korban Pesach is unique in the sense that Korban Pesach is for eating. If there's nothing to eat, there's no Korban Pesach. What's special about Nozi? So Rashi says two things. First of all, we see in the Torah that the Nozi, the shank bone of the Nozi required waving, which shows that the eating part of the Nozi is a special that needs to be taken into consideration and eaten. And furthermore, he says that the Torah says that you use the hair of the Nozi and you use it to cook the Nozi's meat. So we see that it all has to be toy. If it's not toy anymore, then you can't anymore continue with the avodah. Nevertheless, says Rabbi Yeshua, you don't do tzvika. If you do tzvika, it works. So we see that what? What do we see? That the evidence okay, but nitmu abayim b'meis lo yisrek b'mzorak lo yortzah. There's a difference between if the meat becomes tummy, if the owners become tummy. If the meat becomes tummy, but it's okay. If the owners become tummy, even but it's no good. Okay. So our Mishnah says like this: if you've got blood and the part the korban is getting tummy, then you only continue with the avodah if there's what to continue the avodah for. It says the Mishnah, listen, Mani, who's our Mishnah? Rabbi Yeshua, Hitchtas of Yeshua, the Tanya. Rabbi Yeshua, Mekulas Bochen, Shebeteo, Kabbalas in the Torah, Shnishtamen, Kazayis Boso, Kazayis Chelav, if it's a Kazayis Boso, Chelav. Zerkas Adam. Kechatz Basar, Kechatz Chelev, and Zerkas Adam. There's a half a gzais of meat, and a half gzais of chelev if you don't do zrika. But ba'oila, I feel Kechatz Basar, Kechatz Chelev, Zerkas Adam, if they shkula kolim you do. Who can explain why is it that by most korbanos, half a gzais of Basar, half a gzais of Chelev, we don't do zrika, and by oila we do zrika? What's the logic? Who wants to explain? What's the logic? Why should common oila be different? Let's hear something. Why should oila be different from all other kabbonos? What? So because you don't eat, it's therefore. Think about it like this. It's very simple. Once you get into it, it's much simple. Let's say you've got a korban. You shech the korban. and it's all becoming tummy, right? That person touched it all, except for half a gazais which you can't eat, half a gazais which goes on his beach. So you've got nothing of value to continue, so therefore you can't do zvika. Mashein came by a korban oila. Since by a korban oila everything gets burnt, so therefore you can take the half a kazayis of basa with half a kazayis of chayla, put them together, and put on the mizbeach. So you've got a full kazayis of something which people put on the mizbeach. Normal korbanos, the half a kazayis you're going to eat, half a kazayis get put on the mizbeach. Neither the mizbeach nor you is going to do an achila. Achila is always a kazayis. So therefore you can't do zvika. There's no achila left. But by a korban oila, it's all going to go together on the mizbeach. So the mizbeach is doing an achila. Okay. By mincha, even if the mincha is still around, you don't do zvika. That doesn't make any sense at all. Mincha ma'avidata. By a korban mincha is the zvika sadam? No, of course not. What do you do with the mincha? You do a kmitzvah. How can you say if a mincha, if it's all around, don't do zvika? There's no zvika by mincha. Answers the Gemara. We're discussing a minchas nesachim. Certain korbanos, when besides for the korban itself, you have to bring a minchas nesachim, right? Asir saifa if it's a long sheep, two asirs if it's an iron. Nchosam when they scam kimeduba, we say this every day in the maftil and sukkahs, etc. So every day you have to mention. Sorry, they're leaning on sukkahs and the maftil or pesach. Always you do mincha nesachim. So now what happened was like this: a person shechted the korban, he hasn't yet done zvika. The korban became completely tummy, completely every bit of it except for the blood. And now we say to him, don't do zvika, there's nothing left. He says, what do you mean there's nothing left? The mincha is still left. I'm still going to put the flour and the wine on the mizbeach. So let me do zvika for the minchas nesachim. Says the Beis, no, minchas nesachim is not important enough to continue the avodah, even if it's time. I might have thought, since the reason you bring the mincha is because of the zevach. It's as if it's part of the korban, and therefore I should continue doing zvika, like if part of the korban. Kamash malon, we don't. Kamash malon, we don't. So only if you've got part of the korban, if you've got part of the mincha left, not. Says the Gemara Minolon. How do we know all of this? Well, because there are a few droshes to establish the halachas. What are the halachas? If there's a bit of chaylev, do you do zvika? There's a bit of chaylev left, which is toy. You do zvika. So if it's a kazayis, by all korbanos, if it's half a kazayis, then you by an oila with a half kazayis something. Again, if you've got chaylev, you do zvika. If you've got basa, you do zvika. If you've got mincha, you don't do zvika. If you've got half a kazayis of each, then it's with star oila. So how do we know this? Says the Gemara like this. Omar B'Yichnum Mishuma B'Shmol Motobo Mishuma B'Shuba Nechananya. Some say his name of B'Shuba Nechananya. The Omar Kor B'Hiktir HaChelev L'Reach Nichoach LaHashem. The pasuk doesn't mention anything about the basa. Just bring the fats as a reach nichoach LaHashem. It's mashma the chelev is enough. Chelev afa b'shein basa. If there's chelev, even if there's no basa, that's good enough. You continue the avodah. Finding more ashka the chelev. Yisroel hakoved shtei haklos minolon. Whenever you bring a korban, there's the fats that go on the mizbeach, and there's the Yisroel and the shtei klos. The shtei klos are the two kidneys. The Yisroel is a very interesting part. The Yisroel covered was the diaphragm, which is attached to the liver. It's like a membrane, a thin membrane that goes next to the liver. And you take a tiny bit of the liver with it, and when the lungs go in and out, it goes up and down in the animal. That also goes in his back. Three things normally go in his back: the chelev, the Yisroel, and the shtei klos. So therefore, the Gemara says, how do you know if only you've got left is the Yisroel, that you can still do zvika? So the Gemara says, hey, how do you even know? You ask a question, but you're relying on a premise. The premise is that that if you've got the Yisroel, you can still do zvika. But we've never actually mentioned it before. We mentioned chelev, mentioned basa, mentioned mincha, but we never mentioned the chelev and Yisroel. We never mentioned chelev, never mentioned the Yisroel and shtei klos. Says, well, yes, you did. Why? Midek Tali, since you said if the mincha is around, you don't do zvika. Mincha with the loy. The mincha you don't. We can deduce from the fact that you said if the mincha is around, you do not continue with the zvika. It says mashba only because the mincha is around. But if there was something more significant than the mincha, what's more significant than the mincha? What's more significant than the mincha? The Yisroel and the shtei klos. Again, because the Yisroel and shtei klos are part of the korban. So therefore, you said that if the mincha is still around, you don't do zvika. We can deduce from that anything more significant, you do zvika. What's more significant than the mincha? Yisroel and shtei kloyos. So therefore, from there we see that you do. How do we know the Torah only mentioned chayla? The Torah mentioned Yisroel and shtei kloyos. So the Gemara says, "Minolo." As a pleasing smell, anything which creates a reach nichoyach is good enough to do zvika. Says, well, why do you need to have both? The Torah should just said the reach nichoyach and or chaylev, and that would be enough. Why do you have to write chaylev and reach nichoyach? This is not this. The itzich lemichtav chaylev, itzich lemichtav reach nichoyach. Dikos lachmon chaylev, and the Torah just used the word chaylev. Avmin chaylev, and he says a kovod v'shtak loy. I'd have said only chaylev, but nothing else. Therefore, the Torah has to say, because that means the Torah wants to teach you three halachas. Chaylev, yes. You say, yes, carry on doing this week. Mincha, not. Had the Torah just used the word chaylev, you'd have said only chaylev, because that's all the Torah is mentioning. Had the Torah said anything that is pleasing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you'd have said also mincha. So if the Torah has to say the reach nichoyach and the chaylev, reach nichoyach includes everything. Chaylev is coming to exclude only something which is part and goes on the mizbeach as part, intrinsic part of the mizbeach, and therefore we learn that chaylev says the sheiklus, yes, but mincha not. Bosa we learn from the fact that it says vasisel secha bosa v'adam, that if you've got bosa, you continue with the dam. So therefore we've learned to the Ma'isa, and this is how we pass it. Rambam mentions this in a number of places, that to continue with the avodah, there has to be something that you're going to actually either eat and burn on the mizbeach. If all you've got is the mincha, not. Says the Mishnah, Nitmo, new Mishnah, Nitmo kahol. If Klal Yisrael became Tomei, or Yeruboy, or the majority of Klal Yisrael became Tomei, or Yisrael Tameim, or if the Kohanim are Tomei, V'akol Tahim, Klal Yisrael are Tomei. There's a very big machlokas we got in Kohanim. Do we see what happens if the majority of Kohanim are Tomei? The Mishnah says, if Klal Yisrael are Tomei, or the majority of Klal Yisrael are Tomei. Or if the Kohanim are Tomei, what about the majority of Kohanim are Tomei? The Tzrach says, the fact the Mishnah does not say it is a raya that what? No. We're no good. Rather, what should we do? Get the Kohanim or Tomei and send the Kohanim Tomei home. The Rambam paskins that if we work Kohanim or Tomei, then we do with the Kohanim which are Tomei.
What's the chiddush then?
What do you mean?
The
The chiddush is that Mishnah mentions all of Klal Yisrael Tomei, the majority of Klal Yisrael Tomei, all the Kohanim Tomei. It does not talk about what about the majority of Kohanim Tomei. The Mishnah is telling us a chiddush that what? That when most people are Tomei, we do it with Tumah. Mishnah says, yes, so Tumah, you should do it with Tumah. So if the majority of Klal Yisrael are Tomei,
if other Kohanim are available, obviously you use them.
no, the Rambam says not. The Rambam, this is a good question. Chaim is asking, what's the logic? Answers, no, the fact is, if most of the Kohanim are Tomei, we do not expect everybody to work with just the Tomei. Now, this is a very, very big question. How do you work out if Rov of Klal Yisrael are Tomei? What do you do? How do you work out Rov of Klal Yisrael are Tomei? This is a big discussion. There's a beautiful, beautiful sefer, not so well known, called Likutei Halachos. Do you know who wrote it? Who wrote Likutei Halachos? Oh, did he? Maybe.
That's another one.
I
I didn't mean that one. I meant the Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim wrote a sefer called Likutei Halachos, where what he wrote is Halacha L'Maisa. I just want to mention a couple of stories of Chafetz Chaim. I was reading today somebody called Rebbetzin Shulamit Ezrachi. Have you ever heard of her? Big Rebbetzin wrote a book about 30 years ago about the Chafetz Chaim. What happened was he said over there that what happens one time they saw the Chafetz Chaim going up and down stairs. So they asked the Chafetz Chaim, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? So he said, keep fit training. No, that was what he said. He said, because a Kohen has to go up and down the Mizbeach with the parts of the Korban. I want to make sure that I'm keeping fit. So Kohanim, when you keep fit, you have a special kavanah why you should keep fit. Why are you keeping fit? That way that you should be able to do the avodah. So Chafetz Chaim in Likutei Halachos discusses this question. How do you measure Klal Yisrael? And he says like this. There's a machlokas later. Who is included in the Korban Pesach? There's a machlokas Tanoim. Is it the people that are in the Azor, or the people that can reach the Azor within a half a day's travel? The Gemara there says half a day's travel is 15 mil. 15 mil is 15 kilometers. what they would do basically is the beginning of the morning of the 14th of Erev Pesach, they would ask everybody who's coming into the Azar to say, "Am I Tomei or Torah?" And then what? Yes, you'd have. That's right. You'd have poll booths, and you'd go through. You bring in the Kol Pesach. That's right. Maybe so. I'm sure it must be some part of it. And then, if you're saying that you're Tomei, we would count it down to the end. And then, when it came to Chatzos, when it came to midday, we would know if people are Tomei or Torah. And then, once we would know, we would say B'tumah. Nitzma miut alcohol, if only a minority of Kaisel are Tomei, at salvation, that's been. So again, if the majority of Kaisel are Tomei, what do? We're being Pesach Rishon, Tomei. If the minority of Kaisel are Tomei, we bring a Betar, and the minority have to wait for Pesach Sheni. I'll just say very briefly, they were saying out of Chofetz Chaim is to anticipate Mashiach, so we said that he kept fit in order to be able to go on the ramp. I just saw another beautiful story about the Chofetz Chaim, that one of his Gaboim, one of his Talmidim, was once going to another town, to Aishashok, and there was a big Rav there. So the Chofetz Chaim said to him, "Do you mind sending regards from me to him?" So he said, "Fine, send him regards, because when they're traveling, I'll send the regards to Chofetz Chaim." Chofetz Chaim waited. When he came back, they should send regards back. And the Talmud refused to come into the Chofetz Chaim, too embarrassed. Chofetz Chaim calls him and says to him, I asked you to send regards to this Talmud Chacham. You sent him regards, you should come back and say what he replied. So he said, "I wish I could, but he said such a terrible curse against the Chofetz Chaim, such horrible words. I didn't want to come out, too embarrassed." So what did he say? He said, "I look forward to the day the Chofetz Chaim walks around barefoot with stones over his heart." And when I heard those words, I thought to myself, stones over his heart. Chofetz Chaim said, "I'd be happy with the first half. I don't need the second half. The first half, walking barefoot, is a Kohen. The Kohen barefoot, all Kohenim have to walk barefoot. And the stones of his heart was Kohen God." The Chofetz Chaim said. So he said to him, "You should have come back straight away." Chofetz Chaim was a Kohen.
Your cousin.
That's why he was prepared. That's why he was running up to keep fit to make sure he should keep it.
Barefoot tomorrow. You walk from your house barefoot. Yeah, Polly.
Yeah, it was hard. Okay.
No, you drove it.
If a lot of going there are Tomei and you don't do it.
Machlikas.
Why? I thought we said Yisroel can check as well. So why can't we?
But who's going to
The
this weekend?
Voido.
So again, I don't want to confuse again.
Yeah.
If Roiv of Klaisol or the whole of Klaisol Tomei, we do it with Tumah. If the minority of Klaisol, we do it with Tara and wait Pesach Sheni. The question is, if all Klaisol or Tomei, we do Pesach Rishon with Tumah. Now, the next daf, maybe 2 daf, more than a daf, is going to talk about this topic. So it's kedai to get it very, very clear. Moshe, have you got it very clear? Very, very clear. Crystal clear. Again, what's the halachas? Normally we say like this: if you're Torah being Pesach Rishon, if you're Tomei being Pesach Sheni, that is the simple halacha which every child hopefully comes home from school with. Except, if the whole of Klal Yisrael are Tomei, what do? We bring Pesach Rishon b'tumah. The big question will be, and this we're going to discuss dozens of scenarios where Klal Yisrael are Torah, but the Kelim are Tomei. Klal Yisrael are Torah, but the Kohanim are Tomei. Klal Yisrael are half Torah, half Tomei. Klal Yisrael are a third Torah by Beis, a third Torah, and a third Tomei by Sheretz. Klal Yisrael are Tomei because of Zov. Klal Yisrael are Tomei because of other reasons. All these scenarios, you've got to have a very clear picture of what happens. That means like this: generally speaking, when there's only a minority of people Tomei, we say to them, wait for Pesach Sheni. If the majority is, do Pesach Rishon. The question is, what happens in more complicated cases? What do we do? This is the discussion for the next half and half. And it is hard for us who haven't pictured it and haven't experienced it. I remember learning there's a minute to learn on Pesach afternoon, the to do it. It's a special minute, Pesach afternoon. I sit down, I've got Boyd Hashem, is I sit down and I learn Pesach with them. And what happens is you'll be surprised how much the Rambam goes into this topic. And I was doing this Gemara, I said to myself, now I understand a little bit better why, because the Gemara discusses at such an end. Well, it's exactly 50-50. Imagine exactly 50-50 of Klal Yisrael or Tomei, 50% of Torah. And you remember how we count them, right? The Rashi says from the morning of the 14th of Pesach till Chatzos, we count the whole of Klal Yisrael to make sure who's Torah and who's Tomei. So imagine exactly 50. What would you say? All these are questions that need to be answered. Says the Gemara like this. Tanu Rabban. How is you saw to men? Oh. Tanu Rabban. We'll see interesting more. Sabban how you saw to men. Kai saw Tomei v'Kanim v'Klei Shoyos Tohin. That all the Kanim are Torah. Or you saw Tohin. Kai saw Tomei v'Kanim v'Klei Shoyos to men and the Kanim are Tomei. But I feel Yisroel v'Kanim Tohin. Even if all Kai saw Kanim are Torah v'Klei Shoyos to men. Yasu betuma shein kabel tzibur cholok. We don't split. This Brisa holds, which we'll see later that I argue, we don't split, meaning we don't say, look, half of Kaisar Torah, they should do one end of the space of Yosh. Half of Kaisar Torah, they should do the other end, because really there's no reason to mix. No, we don't split Klal Yisrael. That means if we decide that the majority are Tomei, we don't say to the people who are Torah, you make your own separate minyan. No, we don't do that. Klal Yisrael work together, and the people who are Torah, what are going to happen? They're going to eat Korban Pesach, which is Tomei. Do you realize that? It's very hard to appreciate this. Now, Teres asks many questions. Amongst them, they ask the question, it's actually possible never to become Tomei. How? Use only wood and pshutik creates. Not all wood is metami. Or furthermore, make new ones which are Torah. So Teres answers that it's difficult, and must remember there's a lot to be done in the Pesach. So once the kelim are Tomei, we do it. Okay. Says the Gemara like this: only if the knife is tummy from being touched by a dead person. What's special about tumas mace on metal? Does anybody remember?
It stays.
Oh, even more. If metal touches a dead body, what's the status of the metal? Avia voice. If it touches an avatuma, it says an avatuma. If metal touches a sheretz, what does the metal become? No, if it touches a sheretz, it becomes a vishnu. I say it once more, I must admit, it's not easy to remember. Metal touches a dead body, becomes avia voice. If it touches a person who touched the dead body, it becomes an av. If it touches a sheretz, it becomes a vishnu. Says of Chista, when we talk about over here that it's Tomei and therefore we have to do but avoida betuma, we're talking about where it's a metal that touched the dead. Why? The halacha is only av hatuma can be metame a person. The vision of is not metame a person. So again, if a piece of metal touches a sheretz, let's say you've got a dead reptile in your dining room, and you take a piece of metal and touches the reptile, what's that piece of metal become? Vision. You touch that piece of metal, what do you become? Nothing. Nothing. A person can't become a sheikh. But if you've got a dead body in your dining room, and then the metal touches him, then what happens is the metal becomes up. And then if, let's say, you touch it, you become an av. And if you, and again, or even if another metal touches that metal, becomes an av. And then if you touch it, you become a vision. So therefore, what? To be called can be sabbath, but to the cause can be sabbath. You're going to end up anyway becoming Tomei. That means since it's metal, everybody's going to become Tomei. The boss of the meat will become Tomei, because as you're shechting the meat will become Tomei, because we said that that vision can make a shing in the tumor of meat. The person who's shechting will become Tomei. Meaning like this, that if you've got all the kelim are Tomei, so then what happens is, if it's tumas sheretz, then the people who are shechting should stay tohoi, and they'll eat the bossa when the bossa is tomei, but they themselves will become tomei. And we do not allow those who are tomei. Let's say, for example, 9% of Klal Yisrael are tomei. All the kelim are tomei, and 10% of Klal Yisrael are tomei. They will not be allowed to do the avodah, because if they do the avodah, they are actually tomei themselves, and that we don't allow. Because if Truma is mutter b'tzibur, then we wouldn't care. We would just say, since the end of the day it's going to be Tomei, and all the bosses Tomei, we don't care about trying to save those people who are Torah from becoming Tomei. Even the people who are Tomei can do it. The pasuk puts together the halacha that you're not allowed to eat Tomei Basa with the halacha that only a Torah person can eat. Again, this is something Trash that Torah says a few times. Whenever we talk about Tumah, there are two kinds of Tumah. One is called Tumas Basa, and one's called Tumas Gavra. Tumas Basa is when the Korban becomes Tomei. Tumas Gavra is when the person becomes Tomei. When the person becomes Tomei and he eats a Korban, what happens? He gets coals. if the boss is Thomas only allowed. Says Rav, the fact that the Torah puts the two halachas together, Tumas Bosa and Tumas Gava, is to teach you that the whole issue of Tumas Gava is only when the bossa is toy. But if the bossa becomes tome, even if it's a lighter tumah, the gava doesn't become, is not chayav. Says if the boss is going to be tummy and if you're allowed to eat it, so according to Rava, he says like this: if all the knives are tumei sheretz, so all the knives in the Beis Hamikdash are vishin the tumah. You shechted the Kabbalah's Pesach to become sheni the tumah. So if I'm a tumei mace, am I allowed to eat it according to Rava? Yes. Why am I allowed to eat it? If Christus is not. I'm at the end of the day, tumas gava. There's a reason. Says Rava, no. The whole issa to be makbid on tahara is only when the meat is toy. If the meat is tummy anyway, we don't care about the tahara of the person. That's what we should. Okay. Itba. Let's go very briefly what we've learned. If we're okay, Solotami, what do? We do a tumah. Miot, we wait for Pesach Sheni and the rest. Itva. How is you saw mechza to and mechza to? What happens if it's exactly 50-50? That means, let's say it was 100,000 eat and you counted them, 50,000 were toy, 50,000 were top. We consider each half to be like the majority. We consider each majority to be like each half to be like the minority. The more I explain. We split that so into half, and we say each half is the majority. So since the half that 50,000, the 50% of toy, it's not not to follow with. If the people, but the other half is also majority. Majority gets majority. We'll see in a minute. So we look at the people who are toy, we say you are the majority. Since you're the majority, so you do the Pesach Betal. We look at the people who are toy, we say you are the majority, so you're allowed to Pesach Betumah. And what will happen is those who do Betumah will eat the common Pesach Betumah. Oh, you're not allowed to eat common Pesach Betumah. What's the answer? Since the majority are Tomei, so they're allowed to eat the Betumah. And then the other people are not allowed to, and they have to be very careful not to become Tomei. Since it's everybody's considered a miut, so the toy to Pesach Rishon, like every time, whenever you've got toy miut, you can always do Pesach Rishon. But to men is nesa sheni, that's men do Pesach Sheni because they are miut. And a miut or a tome, what's the din? You make Pesach Sheni. Those who are toy do Pesach Rishon. Talk about in Testament Beis. But men in oisin no yesa Rishon v'no yesa Sheni. If 50% of Klal Yisrael are tome, those 50% will never bring common Pesach that year. Why not? The Rishon no Yovdi, they can't bring Pesach Rishon. Why not? Do they have a ruba? The halacha is you can't bring a betumah unless you're void, and since you're not void, you can't bring a betumah. Rishon no Yovdi, do they have a miyut? You're not a minority either, so you can't bring Pesach Sheni either. So if somebody would say to you, if Kaisel are 50-50, what should we do? You will answer, there are three opinions: one Rav and two Rav Kahana. According to Rav, everybody brings Pesach Rishon, and you split the Azor into half, and you make sure not to mix it up. According to screens. Wow, I never thought of that. Very good. I'm wondering, but she said the nice words. It's all practice for it. According to Rav, everybody brings Pesach Rishon. You split the Azor into half. According to Rav Kahana, the Tahavin will do the first, the Tmein will do the second, or alternatively the Tahavin will do the first, and the Tmein won't do either. Okay. Now, what is the Gemara going to do? Is the Gemara is going to try and deduce, to learn our Mishnah and to work out from our Mishnah the halachas. And eventually the Gemara brings that you can't prove from our Mishnah. Again, that's the Mishnah the Gemara. We're up to the third line of the now. If the call all became Tomei, the majority which can be to main by call to him, you can be medayik. What's a good word for medayik? To juice. To juice. Okay, you can be medayik, you can be to juice. That Mishnah talks about a case where the majority of Klal Yisrael are Tomei. What can you be medayik? What can you deduce? If it's exactly 50-50, you don't. Kasha Rav, it's Kasha Rav. According to Rav, what should the Mishnah have said? 50-50 is also good. If it's the majority, everybody does betumah. And the Mishnah wants to tell you that even those who are toy, they don't make their own minyan. Faket, we should in mind that we don't want them to separate. Think about it. That is 60% of Klal Yisrael atomic. So 40% of Klal Yisrael will say, I'm not going to become atomic. Let me do it on the side of the Yisrael. No. We say we don't want that because we don't want that there should be a division in Klal Yisrael. So what happens is, if it's 51%, even those who are toy have to do a betumah. If it's 50-50, then we don't. So therefore, you come in Medayik our Mishnah. Because our Mishnah, you're right. Again, the question of the Gemara was, the Mishnah says if it's roiv, you do a betumah. According to Rav, even if it's 50-50, do a betumah. Answer, well, yes, but if it's 50-50, only half do a betumah. Our Mishnah says everybody does a betumah. Again, Amalach Rav, Rubav, do kul betumah. Paga, lo is lasma, lo is lasma. Says Rav, Achadami mistaba. My explanation of the Mishnah makes more sense. Why? Diktani say for the Mishnah finishes off. Nitmo miut alcohol. If the miut of the color is tame, turn this nisavishim between this and Sheni. Our Mishnah tells us that for the minority are tame, the minority wait for Pesach Sheni, and the majority bring Pesach Vish. Miut to do Sheni. The miut to Pesach Sheni. Our paga loi. V'ovdi bevishoin. V'aloi sas v'aloi sinatzmo. The Gemara says that Rav says, let's look at the second half of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, if the minority are Tomei, what do? The minority do Pesach Sheni and the majority do Pesach Vish. According to Rav Kahana, even if it's 50-50, then what happens is, according to the first Lashon of Kahana at least, what happens? The first half, the half to Pesach Vish, another half to Pesach Sheni. So according to Rav Kahana's first Lashon, the Mishnah could have said 50-50, and the Mishnah would have carried on and said the first half to the first, and half to the second. Says the Gemara, and Kasher Rav Kahana, Kasher Rav Kahana, Amalach Rav Kahana, Nitmu Miut Kahol, Jehunus Nisavishin, Mitminus Nisasheni. Or Pago, if it's half, Jehunus Nisavishin, Mitminus Nisasheni. The Mishnah wants to tell you that if it's a minority, you do the second Pesach Sheni. But if it's 50-50, then that 50% don't do anything. And since they don't do anything, the Mishnah not talk about. The Mishnah talk about case where they have to do Pesach Sheni. Furthermore, that's not true. That's okay according to the second version of Kahana. That what happens if 50-50 or Tomei? What do we do? If 50-50 or 50% of Tomei, what do we do according to Kahana's second notion? They don't do anything. So if our Mishnah couldn't talk about that case, because the Mishnah wants to talk about a case where the minority bring Pesach Sheni, but that's not the case. According to the first version of Kahana, if it's exactly 50-50, what do we do? Half bring Pesach Vish and the Torah, another half bring Pesach Sheni. So when our Mishnah says if it's a majority or Torah, minority or Tomei, the minority waits for Pesach Sheni, the Mishnah did not need to talk about the minority waiting for Pesach Sheni. The Mishnah could have talked about what? 50-50, and it would be exactly the same halacha according to Kahana. So why is the Mishnah talk about majority and minority? So Gemara says, you're right. Really, the Mishnah could have talked about 50-50 as well. And the Mishnah could have carried on and told us the first half to the first, half to the second. Since we want to keep uniform with the language of the Mishnah. The language of the Mishnah is what? That if the first half of the Mishnah talks about the majority of Tomei, so the second half of the Mishnah talks about the majority or toy. But the truth of the matter is that halacha would be the same if it would be 50-50. Did I say for two?
Yeah.
Oh. Right. Okay. So let's get it clear. So far we've had three halachas, three shittahs if it's 50-50. Rav says everybody brings the first one. But kind of the first version says half being the first, half being the second. That is the Torah being the half. And the second version of Kahana, that what? It's don't do it. From the first half of the Mishnah, we thought it could be to Jews, God thought it could be Medayik. And the Mishnah says only the majority are Torah. If it's 50-50, it's mashma that we don't bring it. The Gemara says no. The Mishnah is trying to teach you that when the majority are Torah, everybody brings a majority are Tomei, everybody brings a betumah. And that's not true when it's 50-50. So. Now Shenkin, the second half of the Mishnah is also not a diuk. According to Rav Kahana's second lashon, it's not a diuk because of the fact that you've got what? Why is it not a diuk? Because you can say the second, because they don't do it at all when it's 50-50. And the Mishnah is talking about case of minority do. According to the other version of Kahana, it is a diuk, it's a bit of a kasha of Kahana, but the Gemara says the Mishnah wants to use a uniform language, and therefore it's just like the Reish talks about majority, minority, also the same. The next part of the Gemara is very, very easy. What the Gemara does is the Gemara brings 3 brises. Each brisa says like one of the 3 opinions that we've had just now. So in fact, the Machlekes Rav and Rav Kahana and the 2 versions of Kahana indeed are 3 distinct brises. We're going to have 3 brises which are dead easy because they're all the 3 opinions we've just had. So we'll just say it inside. Tanya Kavosei to Rav, Tanya Kavosei to Rav Kahana, Kitrei Lishni. Tanya Kavosei to Rav, learn like Rav. Oh, you saw Mechze to her, no Mechze to men. I don't know, it's last one, I don't know, it's an answer. It says clearly, if half Torah, half Tomei, we split the Hazor into half. Tanya Krishna Kavod Rav Kahana, if they're half, like Rav Kahana's first notion, that if it's half do the first Pesach, the Tomei do the second. So we have 3 brises to support Rav and Rav Kahana's traditions. Now the big struggle now we're going to have is what? What's the struggle? Is that you've got 3 brises that say 3 different opinions. Rav and 2 versions of Kahana. But how does Rav reconcile the other 2 brises like him? Or how does Rav Kahana's first version reconcile the other 2 brises? You've got 3 brises, we want each one of the 3 versions to reconcile the other 2 brises. The Gemara keeps trying to reconcile them. The Gemara manages it, and some Gemara eventually has to force to say that's Machlokes Tanoim, which is what we could have said right at the beginning. But the point is that we can reconcile a little bit. It says what? Levav v'lelish lebasad Rav Kahana. According to Rav, the second version of Kahana, how did they reconcile the brisa that says that if it's half and half, we do half Pesach Rishon, half Pesach Sheni? Rav didn't say that. What did Rav say? What did Rav say? Everybody does at the beginning. We split it as well. And what did Rav Kahana's second version say? The second half don't do at all. So how can this brisa say do half? Answers Gemara. They were exactly 50-50. Meaning, part of the 50-50 was women. Meaning, like this. If you'd only count the men, it would be majority to who? If you'd only count the women, it would be majority to me. But because you counted both the men and the women, it came to be exactly 50-50. So let's say there was 60-40 men, Torah Tomei, 60-40 women, Torah Tomei. So therefore, you've got to add exactly the same amount of men, exactly the same amount of women. So it came out to be 50-50, right? Because Sova, this Beis holds Noshim Bevishin Nishus. Women, later we're going to discuss much later, the halachas of women regarding Pesach. Some hold that they're not mechuyev at all. Some hold the mechuyev Pesach Rishon, not Pesach Sheni, and some hold not mechuyev, they are mechuyev both. So you've got different versions. This Beis holds that women on the first Pesach are not obligated; they're permitted to do it. So therefore, what happens is like this. When it comes to the first Pesach, we say like this, we have to exclude them. And therefore, what do? We say, what's the majority of Klal Yisrael? If we exclude the women, Torah, majority of Klal Yisrael Torah, because we said 60-40 of the men on Torah, 60-40 of the women on Torah. But if we exclude the women, so now we've got 60-40 Torah. That means when the Beis says 50-50, you push off to Pesach Sheni. Rav, how does it work with you? You just said that that's not true. Answer, we're talking about a very specific case where there was 60-40 men, 60-40 women. And then what happened was we exclude the women and therefore we don't count them. It says majority Torah. Since majority Torah, so that's why we do the Torah, the Pesach Rishon, the Torah, Pesach Sheni. The Rav, the Rishon, the Kamad Rav Kahana, the Tanya, the second bite, the last bite, which says that the Tomei don't do anything. How do they answer it? According to Rav, what should it have said? Everybody brings it the first one. According to Rav Kahana's first version, what should it have said? That the Torah being the first, Torah being the second, and here it says they don't do any. How do they reconcile that? So okay, there was exactly 50-50. But what happened was that when you count the women, then now there's more women who are Torah than Tomei. That means like this. That if you count the men, it's exactly 50-50. You count men and women, there's more Torah. Very good. Because so therefore, women like the first one obligated, the second one are permitted. They can't do the first one. Why? Since women are obligated, so we count the women. Since the women are obligated, we count them, and therefore once you include the women, the majority of Klal Yisrael are what? Toy. So therefore they can't bring Pesach Rishon, the people who are Tomei. They can't bring it. Why? Is half off. Very briefly, it's interesting. It's a nice cheshbon. If you think about it, it's very beautiful. You've got 50-50 the men Torah Tomei. The women are 60-40 Torah. Now, it comes to Pesach Rishon, we include the women because women are chayav in Pesach Rishon. So for the majority of Klal Yisrael are Torah, since the majority of Klal Yisrael are Torah, the miut have to wait for Pesach Sheni. So all those who are Torah wait for Pesach Sheni. Comes to Pesach Sheni, we exclude the women because women are now not included because Pesach Sheni women are not obligated. So now you've got 50-50. Well, the problem is 50% is not miut, and when it's 50% is not miut, they can't do Pesach Sheni because Pesach Sheni was only for the miut. So therefore they can't bring Pesach Rishon or Pesach Sheni. So the Beis says like Rav Kahana's second version, but not because it holds Rav Kahana's second version. It agrees with Rav. That's right, it agrees with Rav that under normal circumstances, if it was 50-50, what would you do according to Rav? Everybody would do it together beginning of first Pesach Rishon. That Beis agrees with Rav. Only in that specific circumstances where the ladies were the majority and then they're not included Pesach Sheni. Says the Gemara, we'll have Kahana Doma Palganami of the second half, do the second. He would explain that Beis is slightly different. What happened was, Klal Yisrael are 50-50, but the only way they're 50-50 is because the women are Torah more than the men. So therefore, it's only because of the women that you've got 50-50 Torah. Because some are Noshim, and therefore again, the people who are Tomei can't work can't bring the first one. Why? Why can't they bring the first one? Because it's 50-50 Torah Tomei, and we're including the women because they're in the first Pesach Hamuchuyah. Since the Tomei that means not like Rav that the women that it would be 50-50 without the women. Without the women, it would be a minority Tomei. Sorry, without the women, it would be a majority Tomei. And since without the women, it would be a majority Tomei, and Pesach Sheni, we don't include the women, so therefore coming Pesach Sheni. Finally, the Gemara says, "Rav Kahana, the Tanya, I show you some mechzet to her, mechzet to men. I don't know if that's one, I don't know if that's one. How does he reconcile that by some? Rav Kahana, Tanoi, ikemad mechzet mechzet kavod, ikemad mechzet mechzet in the kavod." Now it's fascinating. There's a Gemara in Chulin. The Gemara discusses a shaila. You know, when you shecht a kob, when you shecht an animal, you have to cut through. What do you have to cut through? Konon veshet, which are the two pipes. And what happens if you cut exactly 50% of the two pipes? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you what the answer is. It's Lachrikas Rav and Rav Kahana. Which Rav and Rav Kahana? This Rav and Rav Kahana. Says the Gemara, you can't compare at all. This has nothing to do with it. And that's, it was says it's a mistake to compare. This Gemara is discussing, the Torah says tzibur, the Torah says ish. What does that mean? What does mechza? Is mechza et tzibur or is mechza ish? The Rishonim mentioned this Gemara over here, besides the fact that they knew all the Gemaras, that's why they mentioned them here. And that they did that without computers. But the reason is to establish this machlekes is not, is 50-50 roiv or miut. It's a shaila in what's considered tzibur or ish. Okay, I just want to mention maybe. I won't just do the next brisa. This next brisa is really one of those brisas which was just mentioned. It's just we're going to now conclude the whole brisa. And it brings in more shitters about what to do in a situation where it's 50-50. Gufa. The simple reading of this brisa is like who? The simple reading of this brisa is like who? Rav. It's like Rav. Again. You should be all shouting at me. That's like Rav. We said that you can answer it in complicated manners that it fits in Rav Kahana as well, but the simple reading is like Rav. If there's only one more person, you've got 100,000 Yidam, 50,001 are Tomei, 49,999 are Toy. Yasu Betuma, everybody has to do Betuma. Can you imagine how annoyed they would be with him? Because of this one person Tomei, everybody has to eat the Korban Pesach Betumah. The fish and Korban Tzibur L'Cholok, we don't split it. We don't go after one person. You have to have at least two. It's a bit like Rashi in this week's parasha. We don't judge and base in after one. You have to have more than one, at least two. Shenema, he brings a pasuk, top of here on the Aleph, top line. The simple meaning of the pasuk is they're not allowed to become a Pesach outside Yerushalayim. So don't bring the Korban Pesach b'achad shorecha in one of your cities. He reads the pasuk like a bit like Chassidish Shavuot, if I'm allowed to say. Don't change the halachas of Korban Pesach because of one person. Even if you got one shevet which is Tomei, and all the other shvatim are Torah. For example, the whole shevet Reuven is Tomei, and the other shvatim all Torah. That's when we split the azor down the middle and we'll use these screens. You've got one shevet which is Tomei. For example, how could that be? Let's say the godson of that shevet died. So everybody in shevet Reuven went to the Nasi of shevet Reuven to his Levi. So they're all Tomei. But Shimon Levi Yehuda didn't go to the Levi. So therefore we split the azor. My tamid Rab Shimon. Kasova shevet echad ikakahol. This is a famous drush which comes up many times in Shas. Now when Yaakov Avinu was just before the birth of Binyamin, what did Hashem promise him? Goy ukahal goyim yiyamimeko. A nation and a multitude of nations shall be from you. So the Rashi there says, a multitude of nations is referring to national fine, but a nation, which nation is going to come from Yaakov Avinu? He's already had all his sons. He's going to have one more son. What do we learn from that? What do we learn from that? What do we learn from that? That one shevet in Klal Yisrael is considered an entire nation. Many times the Gemara brings us a shame that you don't have to get. That goy a nation and a multitude of nations, every shevet is considered a nation. So therefore, if one shevet is Tomei, we look at it as a whole nation. He says even more extreme. If one shevet is completely Tomei and 11 shvatim are Torah, what do we do? What do we do according to Rabbi Yehuda? We force everybody to bring a betumah. Can you imagine such a thing? Because of the one. Why? We don't split it. Rabbi Yehuda saw like Rabbi Shimon. He agrees with Rabbi Shimon that one shevet is called. We don't want to split, so everybody does a betumah. Pesach is not when they got a whole shevet. When you only got a minority of Klal Yisrael, minority of one shevet. So you can imagine, the Rambam's got halacha after halacha. We're going to have more and more of this tomorrow. Quite complicated halachas where you've got all kinds of scenarios. Half of Klal Yisrael Tomei. So will you remember all the halachas? Because you might. It's all on your fridge. That's very good. Okay, we're going to stop here. We're up to Itzba, and tomorrow you need the next volume.
We need this one as well, though.
Yes, I know.
The first onward is in this one.
Yeah, we speak extra lechaim for finishing a volume of Azkor. Yes, it is. Not so
We've
efficient.
got about 30 days, no more, about 6 days.
Are you going home, by the way?